Hi everyone, investigative foreigner here. There's something I've noticed my entire life that I've been living here, and that's the following. Swedes are known for being cowards, right? They're known for fear of conflict, sweeping everything they find uncomfortable underneath the carpet, and crippling politeness. That's pretty much what they're known for by a global standard now. But that's not actually true. Something I've noticed is this country doesn't really suffer from a fear of conflict. Instead, Swedes only act brave when they're in a group. They cower when it's time to go against the grain, and they only act brave when they know they got the majority behind them.
You cowardly Swede!
I've only really seen them act courageous whenever they're upholding whatever fashion statement status quo that they've decided for at the moment. Try to question those values, and suddenly they're not very scared of conflict at all when they're telling you off about what a terrible person you are and labeling you with anything disgusting imaginable. I've done a few reports on the doctor that was forced to leave this country due to his criticism of the government's policies. Today, we're going to be talking to a woman who has personal experience with this group bravery of theirs, and you might recognize her from one of my previous videos called The China of Europe. Here I highlighted the Swedes' historical cultural obsession with social justice, overcompensation at the cost of human sacrifice, and how their COVID policy doesn't differ in mentality from what they've been doing with immigration policy or feminism policy. In fact, it's the exact same behavior. The process looks something like this. First, they choose a weird policy, then they tie it to their national image, hoping they can come off as unique and get global attention, hoping that whatever insanity they come up with is gonna make them look like a trendy predecessor country that can impress the world so hard it will finally be obvious why Sweden deserves the Big Brother role model status more than America. They want to make you jealous, put simply, and so they turn it into an issue of national pride. At which point, going against their establishment policies is the same as wounding their personal individual pride. That's when the collective starts acting very resentful. Go against their feminist insanity, you're a sexist. Go against their migration insanity, you're a racist. Go against their COVID policy, and all of a sudden you're a Russian spy and an enemy of the nation. I brought this up in my latest update on these COVIDiots, that this actually happened to a woman that tried warning that COVID could come to Sweden before it actually came to Sweden. She was ahead of her time by a few months, and therefore she was reported to be an issue of national security to the department that deals with social protection. Oh, the irony. Now, obviously, the Russian spy insult has been used for all of the other dissident categories I mentioned as well, but you get the point. In my video, The China of Europe, I mentioned how an activist group that lost family members due to Sweden's policy held a protest in Stockholm and were not only yelled at, but also spit at by Swedish people passing by. And that's rather rich for a people that would never dare to act like that when a migrant gang is beating up a single Swedish woman in a fully stocked subway train. A completely full train, and nobody did anything to help her, not even call the police. Every Swede just stayed silent as she was being manhandled. This actually happened here recently, and I will be making a video about this soon. So please do subscribe to my newsletter, follow me through the link in the video description, and don't rely on YouTube notifications that only work a third of the time anyway, if at all. Don't be a moron. Follow my newsletter to stay updated on future uploads. Now, worth noting is that Sweden's national media completely covered up this mass spitting incident, so I actually had to find out about it through a Norwegian article. I then looked up the group, and they were actually forced to stay more silent and down low with their activities due to all of the death threats and harassment that they were facing. It's been so bad that the leader of the group actually ended up leaving the country. And that is who we will be speaking to today. Please share this video if this topic is interesting. Now, you were holding a demonstration in Stockholm with your group, and you were attacked, basically. So, why don't you tell us what happened and what the demonstration was about?
Yeah, so we did several protests in Stockholm, but not only Stockholm, actually. We had also in Gothenburg and other cities. But I was in Stockholm. So what happened is that pretty much every time that we had a protest, there was some kind of weird reaction going on from people passing by. One time they spit at us. They started to actually spit at us.
May I just ask, what were they aged, the people who were spitting at you? Were they young or older, or?
I'd say 20 something or 30, something like that. And they really had that expression of disgust, you know, like they actually got triggered by us being there protesting. Also, we were wearing masks. So I guess that would be one of the most triggering things, as I'm sure you know, masks are the biggest taboo in Sweden, even now. So you can imagine during the first wave, which is when we did this, the protests, it was pretty much insanity to show your face wearing a face mask. It actually felt dangerous.
I've worn a face mask outside, and people look at you very strangely, and that's the truth for whether it's a big city or a small city. And friends of mine have the same experience, and they're Swedish. Now, I wanted to ask you, the signs you were holding up during your demonstration weren't provocative in any way. I mean, I seem to recall there was a sign saying, "My mother shouldn't be a statistic," because someone's parent had died. What kind of signs were you holding up?
You're right about that one. It said, "My mom's death is not a step towards herd immunity." And we had other signs just saying change strategies, things like that, and things also very much related to elderly care homes, which was the biggest problem, as I'm sure you know, that there was a lot of hiding of data from there. And we knew, of course, exactly what was going on, even though the media wasn't talking about it. But we had signs about that also to protect the elderly. So it was not provocative at all. We didn't have provocative signs.
I learned that your group has faced a lot of threats and hate, and you were actually forced to eventually leave the country because out of fear for your own safety. What actually happened there?
Yeah, so the thing is that it started happening after Sveriges Radio had that article, like investigation about Mewas. It started being very hostile for us. And the first person to get threats at home, like a letter, like who is paying you to do this, and you're like radicalizing people online, yeah, this kind of stuff. So he moved because he is an expat also. He is now in Ireland. And then I was second to get a letter, which I knew exactly what it was as soon as my boyfriend came in with the letter. It had exactly the same hand style, and it had a stamp with a dog, just like my friend also got, because we are media watchdogs of Sweden. So this person is really having, like this is a project that someone has now to send letters to people of the group. And it basically said that if I, it asks, "Are you still here in Sweden?" Because it actually sounds like a cry for help. Are you in need of help to pack? Because if so, you are in luck because you're going to get it and quite soon.
Oh, yikes.
I am not from here. I don't know how crazy people are here. If I was in my country, I would know kind of what I can count on. But it started to feel really unpredictable. I didn't know if this was a lunatic just wanting to scare us. I didn't know if it was someone who actually could be standing outside my door waiting. I was already planning to move for a very long time, but this was just the cherry on top of the cake.
It's really sounds like you can't distinguish that one person's hateful letter from how the media and the establishment and just the general Swedish society has been acting in general. Was it the whole of it that kind of built up and caused a very unpleasant vibe in this country?
That is exactly what it was because, there are crazy people everywhere. But I cannot imagine that my country, for instance, would have this thing happening that actually journalists are chasing people and like infiltrating groups Even the government was giving hints about us. They never really named us, but they were kind of, Anlin, they wanted to talk to Facebook and Twitter because their platforms were being used for radicalization. And this news came like a few days after Sveriges Radio did an investigative piece about us, so everyone knows what she was talking about. Yeah, so I felt like, whoa, this is really creepy, like I'm just a normal person, and I really don't understand why they feel so threatened by us, but they obviously do.
It's especially scary because in Sweden you can find out where anyone lives so long as you have their name. So it doesn't take a lot to I mean, doxing is the natural state here, so it doesn't take a lot to find out where someone lives and eventually do something. And it's funny because you say that a Swedish minister wanted social media to crack down on criticism against Sweden's strategy, when Sweden's strategy goes against any global recommendation. I mean, essentially, Sweden's strategy would get you banned on YouTube nowadays because they're going against public recommendations. It's an interesting take on that whole big tech censorship issue because I've gotten the Russian spy accusation for as long as I've lived here, and I talk about a lot of different other stuff. So I wanted to ask you. You said you've lived here for 5 years. What what were some of the rudest awakenings you've had in Sweden? I mean, outside of this COVID strategy thing, are there any other social examples, social settings where you've just noticed that something is very weird and off about this culture?
Yeah, the first red flags started coming because of the whole, personnummer, bank ID, this whole registration. I started realizing that it's very hard to come to Sweden. It might actually be illegal in some ways according to EU law, because I am a Portuguese citizen, so I have the right to just move to Sweden if I feel like it and live there or do whatever, work and study. But I couldn't actually exist there before I had this stupid personnummer, and I couldn't get it because I didn't have a job and because I didn't study. So I was just, it was like this impossible thing to crack, the Swedish system. So I pretty much couldn't even get a library card before they accepted me into the system. I had to kind of live my life through my boyfriend because he's Swedish and he has all the numbers and everything. So things that I needed, it had to be through him. And I started to wonder, I mean, this is really weird because they say that Sweden is such a developed country and still people are going around with this problem, like basic problems, because the system seems to not be prepared to take in people whom they think maybe are not supposed to be there. Somehow, I don't know. Yeah, so I started getting a bit disappointed, but back then it was not a scary thing. It was just annoying, Then when the pandemic came, that's when it was really an eye-opener. But of course, before that, I had quite a few signs that I really didn't care about many times. But I now look back and I see, yeah, that is why.
Were
People
there
being,
any like social signs, social contexts?
yeah, like people being weird because I was not Swedish, and also because I'm so dark. I know it doesn't look like it now because I have the sun in my face, but I am quite dark. And especially in summer, I look like a gypsy. I really do. And I was like feeling so discriminated many times, really. People really looked weird at me, especially when I showed up for job interviews. And they were like, so you're from Portugal. Yes, it's very beautiful, but I hear it's like mañana, mañana. You have to understand that the Swedish system is quite different. We are always on time here, things like this. And I'm like, yeah, I'm Portuguese, but I'm actually also on time.
Yikes, that's such a racist stereotype.
Yes. It was like, whoa, okay. So this didn't happen all the time, but it happened a few times. And I was like, okay, so they really feel superior. I'm like this lower status because I'm from down South Europe. So that is like, and I have had many Swedish people also explain to me, like my boyfriend because people don't say this openly, of course, but those who know me, they explain to me, okay, so here's the thing. There are several classes of people in Sweden, and you belong to one of them that is not at the top in the eyes of most people. That is just how it is, even though they don't admit it.
Wow, well, I've noticed just from personal experience. I mean, I'm a white guy, but I get those weird looks just because I'm a metalhead too, so I wear black clothes. That's enough for them to look at you weird. It seems like anything that deviates from a typical Swede, whether it's a migrant or a subculture, or even Americans and Australians have told me they can't handle living here because of the extreme conformity, because even those are classes that will be discriminated against somehow just because they're not Swedish particularly. I find this fits into a larger pattern. And you have been living here for 5 years, was that the case?
Almost 4.5.
That's how long it took. Did you have any job during this time? Any studying? Any?
Yeah, I when I moved there, I was working with an organization for 1 year, an NGO. And then after that, I started working in preschools. So I worked in several. Uh, you know, in the beginning, it went quite well because I was so extremely naive also. So I didn't see actually how people were treating me. I was just la la la, I have a job, like a 23-year-old, 24, and I'm like, this is going so well. And then I started realizing, wait a minute, this is maybe not going so well, Yeah. So now I understand a lot more than I did back then, because also Sweden was the first country that I moved to. So it's actually quite sad that I have had this experience. First time I moved out of my home country. So now I'm traumatized.
Well, let me tell you something. This is the China of Europe, so I'm not gonna say the rest of Europe is this bad. I think even Norway, Denmark, Finland are better than Sweden, but Sweden does stand out in its exceptional elitism. And I actually wanted to talk to you about the Sweden image and how it fools a lot of people. It lures them here under false pretenses. And I suppose we talked about this before the interview too, namely that the Sweden image is very deceptive. It lures a lot of people here under false pretenses, and the world doesn't really seem to understand. Like you were touching upon earlier, many migrants who come here, they don't get their asylum process treated for many years, and they're not allowed to work during the time. So a lot of people are just pushed automatically into some kind of segregation. What would you say are the practical effects of being lured here as an immigrant to a country that's supposed to be progressive and equal, but in reality it just works like a voluntary North Korea?
I couldn't have said it better myself. These are exactly my feelings. I would probably not even be having this conversation if I had moved to Russia or Belarus. I would expect these kind of things to happen, but I moved to Sweden, which has such a good reputation. So if someone would tell me when I was 22 and moving to Sweden, if someone would tell me this is exactly what's going to happen to you there, I would say, no, this cannot possibly be true. People don't have this kind of idea about Sweden. Even my family can barely believe what I tell them. They always say to me, if it wasn't you telling us, we would not believe this about Sweden. This is in a way a scam. They scam people because they want to portray themselves as so good and progressive. Actually, it's not like that in reality. But like you said, people are lured there. They don't realize this until they actually are suffering it, already being living there. So, I feel quite sad for especially those people who come from outside of Europe, because they really fight a lot to come here. And then they go to Sweden and they are like having expectations. And, I don't know how they feel about it. Of course, if you live in a country with war, anything goes kind of, as long as it's peaceful. But, I feel very sad for people who are fooled about Sweden. And that is why I want to also tell my story so that people can make an informed decision. This is actually lies, what they say. Humanitarian superpower, no, really no. Okay, really, people should actually dig into the reality that the government is trying to hide, and they have been hiding for so many decades. I've seen also some of your videos about the practices they had with, all kinds of things they did, like, collaborating with the Nazis and all these kinds of things.
The forced sterilization that was going on until the 70s.
Yes, until the 70s. People don't know this. I didn't know any of this before I moved there. And I know many people who have lived there all their lives. They moved there with their parents, for instance, and they didn't know this either until I commented with them. And I discovered this through YouTube, some documentaries. This is not something that is advertised. People always love to throw at my face that, oh, but your country has done so many bad things and you had slaves and everything. Yes, but we don't hide it. We really don't. We talk about it all the time. I learned about it in school. Every child does. This is not something that is just under the carpet, but in Sweden, there is a culture of putting things under the carpet. And that's what leads the world to believe that Sweden is above average when it's actually not.
Yeah, the living standard here wasn't that impressive to you, I suppose.
No, the salaries are better than in my country and than in other countries, but how much is that actually worth when you're miserable?
I couldn't have said it better myself. I could say that you're lucky to only have wasted 5 years on this country, because I'm 30 and I'm still living here. So you got away relatively easy compared to some of us refugees.
But I have thought so much about that actually. And I say that to my boyfriend. He's Swedish and he's still there. And I'm unfiltered. That maybe you already understood that, but I just say it straight out. And I'm like, I'm so happy. I know I only wasted 5 years of my life here in this stupid country. And he's like, don't say that about my country. But it's like true. I really feel that. And I know people who have moved there with their parents when they were babies, and now they are like, okay, I hate it here. I am now 30. I have wasted my life here. I feel like I have no country because I don't belong here. I don't belong either in the country where my parents came from because I barely live there. So what is my life now, actually? Should I move from here, start over? This is quite a depressive thing, So yes, I'm definitely happy that I realized this so soon, just after 5 years. And now I'm done with it.
In fact, what you described there is a social process that plays heavily into crime, and especially gang crime. The fact that you don't belong anywhere, you were lured here, and now all you have is your local ghetto and your local gangs as a form of social community. A lot of Swedes don't understand how their elitist attitude actually hurts immigrants more than it helps them. But God bless you for speaking out. I think more people need to hear your story.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on my channel.
Yeah, thank you so much.